Both of them claimed to love her, but was there ever a moment when it was genuine? 10 years ago, she had good friends by her side, but perhaps she was afraid that her own misfortune would be discovered by everyone, so she couldn't face those around her. There had been worried glances directed at her before. She suddenly remembered Assistant J. The image of the head of the department scolding her flashed in her mind, throwing documents at her. She recalled how she could only cry silently by herself. Ji-won jolted up in shock. She remembered that in the past she had ignored her own suffering. At that moment, Assistant Jang had just returned home. As she opened the door, her daughter ran up to her with a bright smile, calling out, "Mom!" Assistant Jang sank down to embrace her daughter, who must have been waiting for her for a long time. Her husband was sitting on the sofa, remote in hand, grumbling about why she was home so late. He was starving. Assistant Jang hugged her daughter and told her husband to stop watching TV and go to the kitchen to make something to eat instead of starving. She urged him to bathe their daughter while she whipped up something to eat right away. He turned off the TV, put his hands in his pockets, and said he had plans. He had to go out. "You just eat and bathe her," he said. Assistant Jang asked why he was out so much. Didn't he see how hard she was working overtime? He walked out the door, putting on his shoes, and said he had been taking care of their daughter all day and was exhausted from submitting job applications. Hearing this, she got angry. "You left her like this? Her hair is still in the braid I did for her this morning, and her diaper hasn't even been changed." Her husband snapped back, telling her to stop nagging. "It's because of you that I have to go out." Assistant Jang was frustrated. She still wanted him to stay home and bathe their daughter, but he just slammed the door behind him and left without looking back, leaving her alone with her daughter, speechless. Ever since she got pregnant, he had used the excuse of a year's salary to quit his job halfway through. Now, he didn't even want to come home anymore. Was he the only one who knew what exhaustion felt like? She was also very tired, dealing with the head of the department's constant nagging while trying to manage the mess of her daughter's food on the table. She still hadn't finished her work. Balancing her daughter on her back while trying to get things done, she was determined to do a great job on this project so that the head of the department wouldn't pick on her anymore. Suddenly, her daughter, who had been sleeping on her back, started to cry. Assistant Jang turned her head to look at the little one and comfort her. It was already 3 a.m., and she had gotten so caught up in her work that she lost track of time. Putting her work aside, she laid her daughter down on the mattress and told her fairy tales to soothe her back to sleep. Suddenly, she reminisces about how, as a child, she wished her life would be just like a fairy tale. Sleepiness hits her like a wave, making her drowsy. She stretches, yawns, and decides to just close her eyes for a moment. Without much thought, she lies down next to her daughter and shuts her eyes. But just as she drifts into slumber, her nose starts bleeding unexpectedly, and she's completely oblivious to it. The next morning, at the office, team leader Kim starts yelling at Assistant Jang. He criticizes her project, tossing the proposal right at her, saying her skills are worse than an intern's. With a fierce expression, he berates her, asking if being at home with her child has drained her creativity. Assistant Jang bows her head, hoping team leader Kim will point out what she's done wrong, but he just angrily jabs a finger at her, questioning if he really has to spell it out for her. After years in the company, she can't even produce a decent proposal. Assistant Jang squats down to pick up the papers he threw on the floor, apologizing and promising to fix it and submit it again. Team leader Kim isn't letting up. He's still furious, ordering her to start over and have it ready by tomorrow morning. Ji-won sits at her desk, frowning and feeling annoyed, watching team leader Kim take advantage of his position to yell at employees when the department head isn't around. She turns to Jo Sumen's desk, where Sumen is smiling happily, looking quite pleased with herself. Meanwhile, Assistant Jang is still bowing and apologizing to team leader Kim, promising to redo the project and submit it on time. He's still not calmed down, waving her back to her desk. Finally, Assistant Jang returns to her workspace. As she passes Ji-won's desk, she looks at her with concern. worried since Ji-won has been working overtime for days. She wonders if she's okay. Ji-won follows her outside, calling out to her with care. But when Assistant Jang turns around, she sees Ji-won with a nosebleed, trying to hide her distress. She asks if Ji-won wants some coffee. Just as she's about to brew some, Ji-won quietly thinks to herself that she's been working too hard these past few days, but she smiles and offers to make the coffee, since Assistant Jang had made it for her last time. Ji-won is genuinely worried, wondering if changing someone else's fate would have consequences. After all, she had died once and come back to life, so whatever happens, happens. Only she knew the rules of this world. If something that had never happened in the past occurs, it would change something in the future. Suddenly, Jae-um reminded Assistant Jang about the project she was working on and insisted that she absolutely should not redo it. Instead, Jae-wong suggested that she follow her lead and create a new project. Jae-wong explained that it wasn't about changing the content of the project, but just altering the font and layout enough to submit it again. She believed that Chief Kim hadn't thoroughly read the content of Assistant Jang's project. He was simply looking for an excuse to criticize her. Assistant Jang hesitated a bit. Submitting an identical version felt a little off, but Ji-won urged her to trust her just this once. With a bright smile, Ji-won added that if Chief Kim complained about the project being the same, she would redo it, and of course submit it under Assistant Jang's name. Assistant Jang thought to herself, is Ji-won really like this? She reluctantly agreed, saying that if the chief found out, they could just say it was a mix-up. Then Ji-won slipped something into her hand. Assistant Jang asked if it was related to the project. Ji-won replied that it wasn't. It was a voice recorder. Whenever Chief Kim scolded her, she should record it. Assistant Jang looked at the recorder. Even though Chief Kim often scolded her, he had worked hard during her maternity leave, so she felt she should have some conscience. Ji-won countered, "Who said Chief Kim worked hard while you were on leave?" She sighed, recalling that during Assistant Jang's maternity leave, she had to handle half of the workload, with the other half divided among the other staff members. She remembered the scene where Chief Kim angrily threw documents and made employees redo their work. He probably only worked hard throwing reports around, she thought. Ji-won reminded Assistant Jang to keep acting normal and to remember to record everything. It might come in handy in the future. After that, the two returned to the office. As soon as they opened the door, they saw Chief Kim yelling at Hyeen again. He was loudly pointing his finger at her, berating her, and she could only bow her head and accept the blame. According to Ji-won's memories, Hyeen would soon be transferring to another department. And, of course, the reason was Chief Kim. He only waited for moments when the department head was absent to act like he owned the place. Ji-won stared at Chief Kim, frowning and thinking, just wait and see. The one who wrote the proposal was not Assistant Jang, but it would be him. The next day, still using the excuse that the project was worthless, Chief Kim threw the proposal at Assistant Jang, shouting at her to start over from scratch. The following day was no different. He continued to nitpick Assistant Jang's proposal, saying she had all this time to work on it, and this was all she could come up with. 3 days later, without even looking at it, he tossed the proposal back, demanding a redo. Days passed, and the demand for a redo continued. A week later, this time Chief Kim pretended the proposal looked better and said he would let it pass. He told Assistant Jang to print it out and bring a copy to the meeting, while the original should be submitted to the department head. He reminded her that the promotion evaluation was coming up and that he wouldn't be so lenient next time, so she better get it right. Assistant Jang sighed and thanked him. She returned to her desk, thinking that he hadn't even read the proposal closely. She had only changed the font and layout, and he didn't even notice. Looking back at Ji-won behind her, who was giving her an okay sign, she smiled, realizing Ji-won was right. Suddenly, a notification pinged. It was Ji-won saying she would submit the proposal to the department head, while Assistant Jang should just print and distribute it to the other staff. Assistant Jang was surprised. Ji-won was going to submit it to the department head, and she was holding the original. But who knows, maybe Ji-won had her own plan. Meanwhile, after grabbing the prepared documents, Ji-won brought them to the department head's desk and handed them over, saying this was the proposal for today's meeting, approved by Chief Kim. The department head took it and told her to prepare for the meeting, adding that Hyeen had already gone to buy coffee, so there was no need to prepare anything else. Ji-won complied, but was curious about Hyeen buying coffee. Soon, the table was filled with Americanos that Hyeen had brought back. Everyone was grateful and praised Hyeen for being so thoughtful. Just as everyone was in high spirits, Hyeen smiled brightly and said, "It's nothing. The department head is treating you, not me spending my own money." Suddenly, Chief Kim's voice boomed, asking who had brought coffee to the company. Hearing this, Hyeen immediately said it was her who had bought it and cheerfully handed him a cup. He not only refused to take it, but also yelled at her for bragging to him. He shouted loudly, criticizing the coffee she bought as overpriced and mediocre in taste. Who drinks coffee before a morning meeting anyway? There's plenty of coffee piled up in the break room. How dare a contract employee use the company card so recklessly like that? Little did he know, manager Jean-Hook had been standing behind him the whole time, his brow furrowed. He informed the man that it was he who had given the company card to Hyeen to buy the coffee. The man was taken aback, stammering that he had also intended to use the company card to buy coffee. Jean-Hook coolly replied that it was his card, and since he didn't like instant coffee, he had asked Hyeen to go get some. Ji-won and Soo-min, standing nearby, were astonished. Ha-jung had used the manager's personal card to buy coffee. No one had ever done that before. Soo-min, with a displeased expression, turned away to another spot. After that, the meeting commenced, with Jin-hook sitting at the head. He asked if the project was from Assistant Jang. Assistant Jang held the project proposal and began to present her work. Everyone focused on the copies in their hands, listening intently to her presentation. Suddenly, Jin Ye-hook interrupted the presentation. He flipped through the proposal he was holding and pointed out that it didn't match what Assistant Jang was presenting. Seeing this, Chief Kim got furious and scolded Assistant Jang. He had told her to submit the original document to the manager, yet here they were with the wrong version. She hesitantly apologized for submitting the wrong proposal that Chief Kim had returned. Chief Kim turned pale and handed Jung-hook his copy of the proposal to review, not forgetting to scold Assistant Jang a few more times. Jun-hook took the document and began to examine the proposal. As if he had discovered something, he asked Assistant Jang if this was indeed the proposal that had been returned. She looked at the stack in her hands and confirmed it was. Jung-hook then turned to Chief Kim and asked why he had returned the first proposal. The man fumbled, trying to cover up by saying the proposal wasn't clear enough. Assistant Jung had hastily patched together some content from the internet and submitted it to him, which is why he had returned it. He then pretended to shake his head, claiming that since this time it was done well, he was approving it today. Jin-hook coldly asked how many times the proposal had been returned. He then tossed the proposal onto the table, telling him that both proposals only differed in structure. The content was identical. In the end, what had he read that made him return it and then approve it? Chief Kim looked as pale as a ghost and turned to scold Assistant Jang for daring to play him. Assistant Jang stammered, but Ji-won stood up and apologized. She explained that the first proposal had been written by Assistant Jang, while the one submitted was her own. Jin-hook questioned her, asking what she meant by that. Ji-won bowed her head and explained that she had seen Assistant Jang unwell earlier and had helped her out. She thought the proposal she received was just a reference document, so she based her submission on that. Since Assistant Jang didn't have time to redo it, she submitted that version to the department head. Ji-won bowed, taking responsibility in front of the department head, admitting that submitting the wrong proposal was her fault. Ji-won sincerely apologized. Department head Kim, seeing this, pointed at her and scolded her, questioning if she was even aware of what she was doing. Mistakes could happen, but how could she mix this up? If she knew it was a mistake, she should have asked for an extension to write a new one. Department head Jin-hook adjusted his glasses, frowned, and shot a glare at Department head Kim, asking if he was trying to pin the blame on someone else. Suddenly, the fierce reprimand from earlier vanished, replaced by a stiffened posture as Kim stammered that he might have been tired and confused. Jin-hook tapped the proposal folder and echoed the question that Kim had just asked Ji-won. How could this be mixed up? He stood up and met the gaze of the bowing man, promising that this would never happen again. Jin-hook looked at him with a cold, wolf-like glare and told him he didn't need to apologize to him. Instead, he should prepare a written self-reflection for him by tomorrow. At that moment, Department Head Kim trembled in fear at Jin-hook's intensity, unable to utter a word. Ji-won, seeing this, brought the new proposal folder to Jin-hook. He accepted it and addressed everyone. For future proposals, they should skip the first confirmation and bring them directly to him for review. The meeting continued, and everyone in the room had their own expressions. Ji-won and Assistant Jang smiled cheerfully, while Department Head Kim looked both anxious and furious. Meanwhile, Jo Soo-men bit her lip in annoyance. The meeting wrapped up, and everyone filed out of the conference room to return to their desks. Ji-won let out a sigh. She had been really scared, but thankfully she had managed to resolve the situation smoothly. She hoped Assistant Jang wouldn't be asking for leave anymore. A message came in for her. It was from Assistant Jang, thanking her for the help. She said that from now on she would be less harassed. Another message popped up and Ji-won clicked to open it. It turned out to be from Jo Soo-men, reminding her not to forget their appointment this weekend. Ji-won thought to herself, did she have any plans with her this weekend? Either way, she wasn't going to go. She glanced at her calendar. Her mouth suddenly froze mid-drag. Gwan's face went pale all of a sudden. Wasn't this weekend the day of their class reunion from years ago? She really just wanted to erase all memories of that day. Back then, young Soo-men had promised to take her to a famous restaurant, but unexpectedly she led her to the reunion instead. As soon as her old classmates saw her, they looked down on her and whispered about her, assuming she must have begged Jo Soo-min to take her along. No one there welcomed her. Ji-won stood frozen, unable to say a word while they continued to gossip. Jo Soo-min smiled, linked arms with Ji-won and introduced her as her best friend. So, of course, she was there. Ji-won, feeling shy, excused herself to the restroom, but in there they were still talking about her. They even thought Soo-min was too kind-hearted and had suffered a lot because of her, yet still took care of her. In their eyes, Soo-min was such a sweet girl, always having to put up with Ji-won. Ji-won sat in the restroom, feeling despondent and stunned by their words. They even thought she was a bad friend. While they were chatting, one friend suddenly remembered seeing Ji-won go into the restroom and hurried outside. Inside, Ji-won burst into tears, memories flooding back. She recalled locking herself in the restroom for 30 minutes, and when she finally came out, there was no one left, not even Soo-min. Lost in her thoughts, Ji-won... Suddenly, she heard someone call her name. Turning around in shock, Ji-won recognized it was Assistant Un-ho, Hye-in, Ji-won's assistant. Hye-in called her name, jolting her back to the present. Hye-in asked what was wrong and why she was so deep in thought in the restroom. Ji-won awkwardly replied that she was thinking about work. Hye-in joked that she was like a busy bee and advised her to relax her mind for a bit. Then Hye-in asked if Ji-won had any plans for Sunday, as she wanted to invite her to hang out at Gajosue. Ji-won remembered she had a date with Soo-in on Sunday, so she told Hye-in she was already booked for that evening. Hye-in felt a bit down upon hearing Ji-won's response, but then suggested rescheduling for the morning instead. Ji-won happily agreed, and both of them were excitedly looking forward to their Sunday morning date. Hye-in was thrilled and told Ji-won to hang tight because they were about to plan an epic adventure. But suddenly, Ji-won realized the lipstick Hye-in was wearing. It was the same lipstick she had spotted in manager Jin-hook's car. Ji-won's mind raced as she recalled a rumor circulating in the company. Hye-in and manager Jin-hook were dating. Perhaps the rumors were actually true. In Ji-won's eyes, manager Jin-hook was a cold, distant figure. While Hye-in was outgoing, vibrant and friendly, Ji-won wondered how two people with such contrasting personalities, like fire and water, could possibly be a couple. She speculated that perhaps Hye-in's lively and energetic nature was what led her to agree to date someone like Jin-hook. Meanwhile, Hye-in was buzzing with excitement about her Sunday date with Ji-won. The two of them exited the restroom together, and as they walked, Hyeni couldn't stop introducing Jiwon to the stations. Jiwon confessed she had never been to the area before, and with a cheerful and confident vibe, Hyeni told Jiwon that she was a regular at a few spas in the area and knew quite a bit about them. Jinhook had just stepped out of his office and overheard their conversation. He asked where they were planning to go this Sunday morning. Jiwon was about to respond when Hyen swooped in, completely dodging Jinhook's question, and whisked Jiwon away in a flash. Jiwon hesitated, glancing back at the manager, thinking to herself, "Can I really just walk away like this?" If she did, the rumors about manager Jinhook and Hyen dating would definitely be true. That's why Hyen had been acting like that just now. Early Sunday morning, Jiwon got a call from the Seoul eye care shop. They informed her that her ordered contact lenses had arrived and invited her to come pick them up. This time, Jiwon decided to reinvent herself and show up to the class reunion looking completely different. It was Jiwon's first time trying contact lenses, and she wasn't sure if it would hurt. She squeezed her eyes shut, and wow! Putting in contact lenses for the first time was definitely no walk in the park. All set, Jiwon hopped into a ride to Geo City Station. At the shopping mall, Jiwon noticed that Hyen had been waiting for her for quite a while. Hyen was utterly amazed by Jiwon's stunning new look. Jiwon felt a bit embarrassed by Hyen's exaggerated expression and told her that it was her first time wearing contact lenses. Hyen was very excited because she thought Jiwon looked beautiful wearing them. Hyen firmly believed that even Kim T looked better in contact lenses than in frames.